In the wake of the overwhelming success of the 3 Grand Theft Auto games on the PlayStation 2, developers were swarming to cash in and make their own open sandbox shooting games, with some more successful than others. And what better property to adapt into a video game than the movie Scarface? While technically a remake of a movie with the same name released in 1932, which in turn was adapted from a book released in 1930 by Armitage Trail, whose story was based on the real-life Scarface, Al Capone, during his rise to power during the Prohibition era. The Scarface most of us are familiar with was released in 1983 and starred Al Pacino as Antonio Tony Montana, who came into Miami during a mass exodus of Cubans in the 80s. Like many immigrants, Tony chases after the American dream, rising from a lowly dishwasher to the ruthless drug kingpin of Miami, before his arrogance and paranoia alienates those closest to him and pisses off the wrong people, leaving him completely alone as his empire collapses around him, killed by his own hubris, and a shotgun blast to the back. But what if it didn't have to end that way? What if Tony had a second chance? A chance to fix his mistakes and build himself back up again? Well, that's the premise of 2006's Scarface the World Is Yours. Fun fact, the first time I saw this movie, I was probably like 7 or 8 years old. I was watching it in Spanish on TV with my parents. No excuses this time around. Definitely bad parenting. I didn't remember the majority of the film, only the ending where Tony gets killed by the skull. You know, that guy with the shotgun. And then he falls into the fountain and the credits roll. While I wasn't traumatized by the movie, my brain always assumed Tony was a good guy, and the movie was meant to be sad because the bad guys killed him. It wasn't until I was a little older, probably when I first started playing GTA, that I watched the movie in full, in English this time, and understood the plot, and that Tony was in fact the bad guy all along.
So say goodnight to the bad guy. Come on.
So with how much I loved Vice City and San Andreas, and with GTA 4 nowhere in sight, I was seriously hyped for a Scarface game. But despite having played it as a kid, I don't have any real memories attached to the game. In fact, all I really remember was my younger brother playing it and how he ended up frustrated and never finishing it. So I'm mostly walking into this game with a blank slate. Does it hold up to the legendary status of the GTA games? Or is it dead in the water like Tony is at the end of the movie? Let's find out. As a heads up, the majority of the footage and video will focus on the PC version of Scarface the World Is Yours. The PC version is, or I should say was, notorious for how hard it was to get working on current hardware. With tons of graphical and technical issues, it was almost unplayable. But thanks to the modder Silent, who I previously mentioned in my Bully video, a patch has been released that gets the game working. Not only that, but thanks to the Scarface Remastered project, run by the Neonix modding team, the game has been enhanced with better graphics, higher quality textures, updated models for characters like Tony and some NPCs, and better models for weapons with higher quality sounds to match. Normally, I avoid mods for the games I cover unless it's to get them running smoothly, like I did for Bully and GTA 4, but the game looks so damn good thanks to the Remastered project, I just couldn't resist getting everything set up to play it on PC. I'll include links in the description on where to get the mod and how to install it. Can't link where you can find a copy of the game, even if you can't buy it digitally anymore, but I'm sure you guys are clever enough to find a place with old games download to get a copy of your own. I also did record a few hours of footage from the PS2 version, mostly to confirm some things about the controls, bugs, and to give you a better idea what the graphics actually were like.
You wanna play rough? Say hello to my little friend! Your horse? Go!
Scarface the World is Yours picks up during the final shootout of the movie, letting you take control of Tony as he fights Sosa's assassins, and giving you the satisfying feeling of killing the skull for killing Tony in the movie. Fighting his way out, Tony gets away when the Miami police show up and finish off Sosa's men. Escaping to the jungle, he vows to correct his mistakes, rebuild his empire, and kill Sosa. After 3 months, he's kicked his coke habit and returns to Miami to begin his rise to the top again. Honestly, you couldn't ask for a better premise for a game. What Scarface fan hasn't wished that Tony survived, possibly going on to star in more sequels? You couldn't ask for a better start to a game either. Instead of a slow start with a few missions easing you into the game and its mechanics, like most GTA games, here you're thrown right into the action, fighting for your life against an army of hitmen. Though the game does give you an optional combat tutorial to learn the controls and even ties it into the narrative, having the tutorial work as a flashback to Tony's military training in Cuba. Combat itself is similar but much better and fleshed out compared to the GTA trilogy. Off the bat, the lock-on is perfect. It's smooth, fast, lets me switch between targets easily enough, and it never felt like it got stuck locking onto random enemies. Once locked on, you can choose different body parts to aim at. This makes things like headshots a little easier, and also lets you dismember goons if you hit them with a strong enough weapon. Also, depending on what body parts you end up hitting, you'll earn a different amount of balls. Balls, as weird as it sounds, work as an energy meter for Tony. His balls meter is this white ring around his health that slowly fills up as Tony kills his enemies, being able to increase it further by taunting them too. Once full, you can activate a rage mode that will shift the perspective to first person, temporarily making Tony invincible, giving you infinite ammo, one-shotting most enemies, and recovering his health. Also, the higher your balls get, the bigger your balls get, the more ball points you accumulate throughout the game, will unlock women for Tony to meet, which the games refer to as femme fatales, but are more like girlfriends for him. Seek them out on the map and talk to them, and they'll give a stat boost to your health, stamina, or balls. Afterwards, you can find them hanging out in Tony's mansion, standing around, looking all pretty. Returning to combat, it makes use of some cover mechanics, letting Tony shoot from behind a wall and also crouch. But for the life of me, I almost never used it throughout the game, as you can usually survive a decent amount of gunfire when getting into fights, and most missions don't give a lot of opportunity to actually use cover. I'd say the only time it's really necessary, assuming you even have any, is to reload, as Tony practically stops moving when reloading a gun, making you an easy target. Running up close to someone will let you do a special execution, one-shotting them and netting you some extra balls. Overall, the combat is solid. The way the guns handle and fire are much better than the GTA trilogy. And outside of some encounters, fights never feel unfair, with health pickups generously spread out during missions in case you're in trouble. Even shooting while driving is better, as you can use just about any gun while driving. And instead of just spraying a car you're driving by, you can lock onto a target just like if you were on foot, though it's harder to be precise since your own car will be moving. Now, the open world Miami isn't quite as big as San Andreas' map, but has plenty of places to visit. Divided up into 4 areas: Little Havana, Downtown, South Beach, and North Beach, along with a set of islands south of Miami. The whole map is accessible right from the beginning, though there aren't any missions or things to do in the later areas until you progress the story. Now, the story doesn't work the same way as it does in GTA, where you do missions for one person before moving on to another, or having multiple quest givers unlocked all at the same time. Instead, it's tied directly to Tony's reputation and how much territory he controls of a given area. It's essentially a mix of the asset missions from Vice City and the gang warfare mechanic from San Andreas. After Tony returns to Miami, he's been left with nothing. All his assets, money, drugs, and his mansion seized by the Miami PD or destroyed by Sosa's goons during the initial attack. So he'll need to rebuild his empire by making drug connections, selling said drugs, and using the money he earns to buy property. The game introduces this flow during the first mission, where Tony reconnects with an old contact, Felix. Felix will fill Tony in on what happened while he was gone and how his rivals took control of the drug trade. To get him started, Felix will give him 200 grams of coke and point him to a local dealer, Coco, for info on who to sell to. Tony can then deal to 2 local buyers, using a short button prompt to try and sell the drugs for maximum profit, afterwards earning enough to buy back his mansion from Vice.
Maybe you two should go home and donate a little something to your wives, you know? Relax a little.
Now, anytime Tony has drugs on him, he can approach local buyers to sell to, who are represented by white dots on the map. It's a simple mechanic, if a bit repetitive, as the button prompt remains exactly the same throughout the game. Now, coke can be hard to come by, with only a few grams dropped by local gangs when you kill them. This is where Felix comes in, as you can do lead missions for him that will net you a bigger drug supply. Now, what to do with all that cash you're making? Well, first, you're going to want to launder it, as any cash you have on you disappears if you're busted by the cops or get killed. After ripping off one of your rivals, Gaspar Gomez, Tony reconnects with his old banker, Jerry, to help launder his dirty cash. You can visit any bank branch in Miami and walk in to deposit your ill-gotten gains, using the same button press mechanic from drug deals. Your success rate determines how much of a cut the bank gets, and also doing double duty to let you save your game. With your cash now clean and safe, you have several ways to spend it. First, you can use the money to clean up your mansion, change its style, and buy tons of furniture for it, like the ashes of Tony's sister, Gina, who makes a cameo in the opening as a corpse, having been killed by one of Sosa's men when she showed up to try and kill Tony. Or buying Manny's ashes, Manny being Tony's friend who rose up the ranks along with him, before Tony killed him thanks to his coked-up paranoia, and for marrying his sister, which is why Gina was trying to kill him in the first place. Next, you can invest in exotics. Not furniture exactly, but just gaudy and expensive stuff to flex your wealth and boost your reputation. Then you can buy a bunch of vehicles with different cars and boats unlocked as your reputation level increases. Now you're not going to go and get those cars yourself, right? You're Tony fucking Montana. Instead, use that cash to hire a driver, who you can call up to drop off your ride and pretty much negating any need to steal cars like in GTA. Unless your ride gets destroyed by the cops or other gangs and you don't have enough time to actually call the guy. Eventually, you don't even have to drive yourself and can call up your driver to fast travel around the map instead. You'll also use your cash to buy weapons and upgrades for them, slowly unlocking better weapons as your reputation increases. At first, buying them from NPCs around the map, before paying for an arms dealer over the phone, where you can access those new weapons from either your weapons locker in your mansion or the trunk of your car. And finally, what you'll really need your money for, buying up businesses around Miami. Just dealing to randos on the street isn't going to cut it if you're looking to grow and rise back to the top again. Instead, you'll want to purchase legitimate businesses to act as fronts for your growing drug trade. Fronts are unlocked as you increase your reputation, first having to speak to the owner, and solving some problem for them before they're willing to sell. After you buy, you'll get a reputation boost, getting a controlling percentage of the local area's turf, and can now sell drugs to your fronts. Taking control of each turf, along with increasing your reputation level, will unlock the next story mission, and progress the game. But you still have some obstacles in your way, mainly the local gangs and the cops. Needless to say, the gangs around Miami don't welcome Tony back with open arms when he starts muscling in on their turf. You'll constantly butt heads with the gangs working for your various rivals, each area marked with skulls representing one of the gangs. Stroll into their territory and open fire, and you can take control of a small percentage of their turf after you kill a few waves of goons. This will also cause your gang heat to rise, lowering how much you can make from selling your product to local dealers, but also increasing the chance gangs will retaliate against you or any of your fronts. So you'll either have to smooth talk your way out of trouble, or pay to lower your heat. Or once you get your reputation high enough, you can hire an enforcer who can go out and take care of gangs for Tony. On the other side of the law, we got the Miami PD. While basically corrupt themselves, what with Vice pocketing a bribe from Tony to get his mansion back, they don't like Montana shooting up the streets and causing trouble in their neighborhood. Cops don't work here like they do in GTA. instead of a wanted level with increasing levels of police brutality raining down on you, depending on the amount of stars you have this white meter filling up around your minimap. Things like walking around with a weapon in public, killing gang members, or running over pedestrians, filling it and getting their attention. I should point out that you can't actually shoot pedestrians in this game, as Tony refuses to kill innocent people. Fill up your wanted meter and a red circle will surround you on the map, with cops coming after you and another red meter filling up. You have to get out of the cops' circle of view before it fills up, otherwise you're fucked, as the entire Miami PD just instantly spawns, destroying your car and shooting you to pieces. It's almost impossible to escape once you get to this point, and it's more or less treated as an instant game over. That said, the cops aren't dumb, so even if you get away, you'll still end up building up heat with them. This causes them to be more aggressive the next time they come after you, along with having more cops on patrol in the city, and increasing the percentage cut the bank takes from your deposits. So like the gangs, you'll have to either sweet talk the cops to lower your heat, or pay them off. Or you can hire an assassin, this totally not suspicious woman in a schoolgirl outfit who can kill certain targets to lower cop heat. Honestly, this heavy focus on taking territory, buying properties, dealing drugs, and trying to keep your rivals and the cops off your back makes Scarface the World Is Yours less of a GTA clone and more like a criminal empire management sim, which is by no means a bad thing, and helps the game stand out in a notion of GTA imitators. This gameplay loop will make up the majority of your playtime, and kind of overshadows the story. Story missions will focus on Tony trying to get rid of his rivals, the Diaz brothers, Nacho Contreras, the previously mentioned Gaspar Gomez, and eventually the man who destroyed Tony's empire, Alejandro Sosa. After taking a decent amount of control of Little Havana, Tony will get ambushed while at the Babylon Club. Fighting off his assassins, he interrogates one, finding out they were sent by the Diaz brothers, but more importantly that they killed his mama. Pissed at the loss of his mother, Tony pays the Diaz brothers a visit, and brings his friend Mr. Chainsaw.
Holy shit! You and your fucking brother are dead!
You on this, turf fucker, which means your ass is mine.
This mission sounds and looks cool on paper, but man, the chainsaw attacks awkwardly. You're also still getting shot at, so it's easy to die if you don't move fast. After killing the Diaz brothers, Tony will take control of their storehouse to push even more drugs to his fronts, securing his control of Lil Havana. Sometime later, Tony will get betrayed by his lawyer, George Sheffield, who showed up previously near the beginning of the game, and who has an associate of his try to lure Tony into an ambush at Freedom Town, lying that his ex-wife Elvira has been kidnapped. Freedom Town is the refugee camp where Tony stayed when he originally arrived in Florida. This is actually one of the tougher missions, as you're stripped of all your weapons when starting it, and have to survive by stealing weapons from goons, first beating one up for their machete, before using it to kill other guns and eventually getting up to an assault rifle. After surviving the ambush and taking control of downtown, Tony will receive a call from one of Sosa's rivals, the Sandman, who invites Tony to the islands to meet him in person, and to strike a deal so that they can work together. Sandman also really reminds me of Dr. Eggman with his design. He'll ask you to help his ex-girlfriend Venus, who in turn needs Tony to help out some of the locals. After more reputation grinding, you'll be able to confront your next rival, Nacho Contreras, which has you meeting him at and fighting through his casino ship tanker, which ends with an awesome scene where he gets eaten by a shark. Which can also happen to Tony if you're swimming in the ocean while bleeding too much. Skipping forward towards the end of the game, the Sandman will need help protecting his plantation from Sosa's goons, and then liberating his drug lab on his remote island, leading to the final mission of the game, confronting Sosa on his own turf in Bolivia.
Do you believe our friends in Washington would approve of Bolivian tanks on the streets of Miami, George?
Fuck Washington. I got them in my back pocket. A few greenbacks spread to the right hand, you make them look the other way for a day, never hurt anybody. Jesus Christ, you fucking lawyers are all the same. Montana has declared war on everybody in Miami, and he's obviously not going to stop until he steps into this goddamn living room.
It's long and brutal, Tony fighting off a massive army of his goons, slowly making his way through the mansion. First killing Sheffield for his betrayal.
Fuck me in the ass.
This is my law, George.
Then chasing down and killing Gaspar.
It's over, Gaspar. It's over for you now. You hear?
All leading up to a face-to-face with Sosa.
What about what you did? I told you not to fuck me, and you did, Tony.
There were kids in the fucking car, Alex. Innocent kids, huh? What kind of animals you got working for you?
I want to clear something up with you, Tony, before I kill you. When you move 400 kilos a month, it's imperative that you do kill children. That way, heroes don't get confused and go on 60 minutes. They instead crawl back into the hole they came from.
Hey, Sosa, maybe it's time for you to make that call, huh?
Before pumping that asshole full of holes. The game ends with Tony back at the top, sharing his hot tub with Venus. The two of them together now, apparently. Sorry if the story feels a little abbreviated, especially compared to how I tend to be more thorough like in my GTA videos. But there really isn't much there to talk about. The missions for the properties you're trying to buy, along with taking over turf and raising your reputation, really are the bulk of the game. You'll have some interesting characters show up here and there, like this guy voiced by Bam Margera.
I'd love to, man, but I'm between a rock and a hard place full of assholes who want to destroy the business.
Or this dude who looks like Axel from Kingdom Hearts.
The name's Axel. Got it memorized.
But there are one-off characters who don't contribute to the plot. Sandman and, to some extent, Felix are pretty much the only exceptions. Same could be said about Tony's rivals, with only Gaspar and Sosa having any real presence throughout the game, with Sosa usually calling in to threaten Tony anytime he raised his reputation. But while the story itself felt a bit lacking, the missions, for the most part, remained pretty high in quality, usually taking you through large set pieces as you gun down wave after wave of goons. For example, the missions you do for the Sandman, the first having you protect his plantation, defending one area as waves of Sosa's men try to break through, before teaming up with the Sandman afterwards to take down a chopper dropping off even more of Sosa's men. Or the follow-up where you have to go to his drug lab, traveling to an isolated island, fighting your way through the jungle, freeing any hostages you run into, while also picking up packages of the Sandman's drugs, and then escaping the island with a chopper on your back. And you're not always on your own either, as you'll occasionally get some backup while trying to take over some storehouses. They don't survive for particularly long, but it's nice to have them there. And of course, the previously mentioned final mission assaulting Sosa's mansion, if only for the catharsis of killing that bastard. If I had to level some criticism at the game, other than the obvious like the repetitiveness of having to take over territory, or constantly having to grind out your reputation before unlocking the next story mission, it's probably going to be about Tony himself. His voice is polarizing to say the least.
I always wanted to own my own drive-in, you know? This is America. I can sit in my car and watch Bogart on the big screen. I got the catch, how much?
Apparently, Pacino handpicked the voice actor for Tony in the game, a guy by the name of Andres Suglioso. And it's not that his voice acting is bad. He does kind of sound like Tony, even if it's obvious it's not Pacino. I think the problem is less his voice and more his dialogue. Tony's lines are just stupid.
You show me some balls right now, and we can make this work again, okay? Why you gotta talk to me like that, huh? Like you got some fucking baseball bat up your ass or something.
You would know what that feels like, Cubano.
You're 50, you got a bag for a belly, you got tits, you need a bra, they got hair on them, you got a liver, you got spots on it.
Like not something an actual human being would say, and more so what a writer who has a passing knowledge of the movie Scarface would assume Tony Montana speaks like. only really knowing his lines from like the trailers and things like that. Tony has a one-liner for just about everything. Honestly, he feels less like Tony Montana and, well, more like a GTA protagonist. I think that's mainly why so many people have issues with his voice. If he spoke normally or had the chance to emote more, instead of just acting cocky and angry, his voice probably would have been easier to swallow. That might be more of a me thing though, as there's a serious difference in tone between the movie and the game that's a little hard for me to shake off. Especially since I'm looking at it from a more critical point of view compared to my teenage self who just wanted to shoot and blow things up. I'm also kind of mixed about the music in the game. While it has pretty much the entire Scarface OST, it also has a lot of songs that don't fit the game or the time period it's set in. Also, I'm not really a fan that the radio music keeps playing after you leave a car, and that you have to turn it off yourself every single time. The islands are also quite the hassle, as you're constantly under attack from the cartel and pirates there, making it tedious to travel around and do certain missions. Criticisms aside, the game does feel like a more polished GTA game in some aspects. Like I said before, the shooting is easily better than all 3 PS2 games. Having Tony manage just about everything from his phone is such a nice quality of life feature. From ordering your cars, weapons, fast traveling, buying exotics, or paying down your heat, it feels nice not to have to constantly run around doing busy work, to take care of each of these things separately. Though I feel like at a certain point an option should have been unlocked for Tony's goons to go pick up the money he's made from his fronts, instead of having to do it himself. It could have cut down on some of the repetitiveness of the gameplay. But overall, I really enjoyed my time playing Scarface the World Is Yours. Like GTA, it feels fun to boot up, get into shootouts with rival gangs or the cops. The guns and especially the rage mode make you feel like such an unstoppable badass. The graphics of the PS2 version hold up surprisingly well, especially the NPCs, who look leagues better than anyone you've seen in San Andreas. Tony being the shining example with a nice attention to detail. I think it set down a good foundation for what it wanted to be, and enough to differentiate itself from being just another GTA clone. It's just a damn shame it never got its planned sequel. Apparently, it would have had Tony heading out to Vegas to take over casinos and build a new empire out there, which sounds like a perfect setting for him. Maybe add in some gambling mechanics, refine some of the property management, and flesh out the story. It did get a game on PSP that was released alongside the original, which is apparently a turn-based strategy RPG. It certainly looks interesting. If any of you have ever played it, let me know how it is. With the game being removed from digital storefronts, it's a shame that more people can't experience it nowadays. I think it could definitely use a remaster or remake, especially after playing it with the remastered mod for this video. And in a modern world where there really aren't any good GTA alternatives anymore, something like Scarface would be greatly appreciated. And that's the video. Thanks for watching, guys. Much shorter video than I was initially expecting, but since most of my footage was taking over turf for grinding out my reputation, I figured it would end up being too boring and repetitive if I went through every little thing of my playthrough. Thanks to the releases of Bayonetta 3, God of War Ragnarok, and now Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, I'm having a hard time balancing the games I'm playing for fun, along with the ones I want to talk about on the channel. That said, I've started on the next 2 games I want to talk about, one which of course is San Andreas, which, if I balance my time correctly, should be out the week after Thanksgiving, so keep an eye out for that. I want to cover another GTA clone next month too, and most likely it's going to be True Crime Streets of LA. Again, thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a like and comment down below. Did you play Scarface The World Is Yours when you were younger? Did you consider it just as good or better than GTA? And if you're new to the channel and like my content, I'd appreciate it if you subscribed. Also, check out some of the videos suggested here at the end. I'm FuzzySlippers, and I'll see you later. Peace.